At my grandson's birthday party, my seat was gone. My daughter-in-law laughed and said, "We didn't plan for you." I just smiled and walked in. "I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end of this story and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this moment, this feeling, can travel." I've always believed that family celebrations were supposed to be warm, loud, a little messy maybe, but full of love, especially a child's birthday, especially your grandchild. That morning, I took my time getting ready. At 72, I no longer rush for anyone. But that day, I wanted to look nice. Not for attention, not for compliments, just to belong in the photos. I chose a soft lavender blouse. My late husband used to say that color made my eyes look brighter. I pressed it carefully, took a few extra minutes with my hair, even put on a little lipstick, though I rarely do anymore. On the kitchen counter sat the gift I'd picked out weeks ago, a small red bicycle, training wheels still attached. I had gone to 3 different stores before finding the right one. Not too big, not too flashy, just right for a 6-year-old boy who still wobbled when he laughed too hard. I ran my hand over the handlebars before leaving. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I whispered, as if he could hear me from miles away. The drive took 25 minutes. Suburban streets, identical houses, lawns trimmed too neatly. The kind of neighborhood where everything looks perfect from the outside. As I pulled up, I could already hear the party. Children laughing, music playing, balloons tied to the mailbox. A big banner stretched across the garage that read, "Happy birthday, Ethan." My chest warmed a little. This was what I had been picturing. I grabbed the gift, steadied myself, and walked up the driveway. No one noticed me arrive. Not at first. Parents stood in small circles, holding paper plates and plastic cups. Kids ran past me, sugar-fueled and carefree. Somewhere, someone was lighting candles. The smell of grilled burgers drifted through the air. It was a beautiful party. It really was. I stepped inside the backyard, scanning the tables. That's when I noticed it. Every seat had a name. Little white cards, neatly placed on bright-colored plates. Mom, Dad, Aunt Lisa, Uncle Mark. Even the neighbors had names. I moved closer, slowly, carefully, reading each one, smiling politely when someone glanced my way. But I couldn't find mine. Not on the main table, not on the side table, not even near the kids' area. At first, I thought I had missed it. Maybe they'd placed me somewhere quieter, somewhere easier. People do that sometimes when they think they're being considerate. So I checked again, and again. Nothing. Just empty spaces filled by other people's names. That's when she appeared beside me. My daughter-in-law. Perfect hair, perfect smile, always perfectly in control. She followed my gaze down to the table. Then she laughed. Light, casual, like it meant nothing at all. "Oh," she said, waving a hand like she was brushing away a crumb. "Looks like we didn't plan for you." Just like that. No apology, no correction, no attempt to fix it. Behind her, my son stood near the grill. He heard it. I know he did. Because for a second, just a second, his shoulders stiffened. And then, he didn't turn around. I felt something shift inside me then. Not break. Not yet. Just move. Like a piece of furniture being quietly pushed out of place. "I see," I said. My voice didn't shake. I made sure of that. I placed the gift down gently on the table, right next to a stack of unopened presents. No one noticed which one was mine. No one asked. Around me, the party continued. Laughter, music, the flicker of candles. A child shouted, "Grandma, look!" But it wasn't meant for me. I stood there for a moment longer than I should have. Long enough to understand something I had been ignoring for years. This wasn't a mistake. It never had been. And as I looked at that table, at all those names carefully written out, I realized something else. They hadn't forgotten me. They had simply decided. I didn't belong anymore. I didn't argue. I didn't ask where I should sit. I didn't ask why my name wasn't there. I just stepped back and found a place near the edge of the yard. A small folding chair, half hidden behind a table stacked with paper plates and napkins. The kind of chair people use temporarily. The kind no one assigns to anyone. That felt appropriate. From there, I could see everything. The long table decorated in bright blue and yellow. The balloons tied to each chair, swaying gently in the afternoon breeze. The cake, 3 layers, professionally made, with my grandson's name piped in perfect icing. Ethan, 6 years old. I remember when he was born. I remember holding him in my arms while my son stood beside me, nervous and proud. I remember thinking, This is what life gives you back after everything it takes. Now I sat 10 feet away from him, like a distant guest. Or maybe less than that. No one brought me a plate. No one asked if I needed anything. I watched as my daughter-in-law moved from group to group, smiling, laughing, touching shoulders, adjusting decorations like she was hosting something important. Because she was. Just not for me. At one point, she passed right by where I was sitting. Our eyes met for half a second. She didn't stop, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge me. It was subtle. So subtle, most people wouldn't even notice. But I did. Because it wasn't new. My son stayed by the grill most of the time, flipping burgers, laughing with the other men. Every now and then, he glanced toward the tables, toward the chairs, toward me. And every time, he looked away, like he was afraid eye contact might turn into responsibility. A little boy ran past me, nearly bumping into my knees. Sorry, he said quickly, already halfway gone before I could respond. I smiled anyway, out of habit, out of something older than pride. The music got louder. Someone started organizing games. There was a piñata hanging from a tree branch, bright and cheerful, filled with candy and small toys. Children gathered around it, squealing with excitement. Everyone come closer, my daughter-in-law called out. Everyone did. Except me. I stayed where I was. No one asked why. No one noticed I hadn't moved. And in that moment, something inside me became very, very quiet. Not empty. Not broken. Just still. Like the part of me that used to expect things had finally decided to stop. I folded my hands in my lap and watched. Watch my grandson laugh as he swung at the piñata. Watch my son cheer him on. Watch my daughter-in-law clap like everything was perfect. And for them, maybe it was. A woman sitting across from me, someone I didn't recognize, leaned over slightly. Are you with the family? She asked politely. I paused. It was such a simple question. Such an easy one. And yet, I found myself choosing my words carefully. Yes, I said. Then, after a small beat, I added, I'm Ethan's grandmother. Her expression shifted. Just slightly. Oh, she said. That's lovely. But her eyes flicked toward the main table, toward the empty space where I should have been. Then back to me. Something unspoken passed between us. Understanding. Or maybe recognition. She gave me a small, kind smile. The kind strangers give when they see something they don't want to name. I think the cake's about to be cut, she said gently. Thank you, I replied. When everyone gathered again, I stood up this time. Not because anyone called me, but because I refused to miss that moment. I walked closer. Not too close. Just enough to see. The candles were lit. 6 small flames flickering. Make a wish, everyone shouted. Ethan closed his eyes. I found myself holding my breath. As if somehow whatever he wished for might include me. He blew out the candles. Applause erupted. Phones came out. Pictures were taken. Family crowded in around him. My son on one side. My daughter-in-law on the other. Arms wrapped around him. Smiling wide. Framing the moment. Freezing it in time. I stood just outside the frame. Close enough to see every detail. Far enough to not exist in it. No one said, wait. No one said, where's mom? No one made space. Not even a little. And that's when I understood something with complete clarity. This wasn't about a chair. It wasn't about a name card. It wasn't about a simple oversight at a child's birthday party. This was about position. About place. About where I stood in their lives now. And the answer was, nowhere. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. More steady than I expected. Then I looked back up at the scene in front of me. At the perfect picture they were creating. At the smiles. The laughter. The illusion. And quietly, without drawing attention, I stepped back again. Not out of hurt. Not out of weakness. But because I had finally started to see the truth. And once you see it, you can't pretend anymore. The party didn't end all at once. It unraveled slowly, like something that had been carefully put together and just as carefully meant to exclude one person. Me. After the cake was cut, people began settling into their seats. Real seats. Assigned ones. Laughter drifted across the tables as plates were passed around. Burgers, hot dogs, slices of cake carefully placed on bright paper plates. Drinks poured. Conversations overlapping. Normal. Everything looked normal. I remained standing for a moment longer than necessary. Waiting. Not for an invitation. Just for acknowledgement. But none came. So I walked back to that same folding chair. The one near the edge. The one no one had claimed. And I sat down again. From there, I watched as my grandson was handed the first slice of cake. Then my son. then my daughter-in-law, then everyone else. The plates moved in a circle, smoothly, efficiently, deliberately, until the last slice was gone. No one brought one to me, not even by accident. I noticed that, because accidents happen. But this was precise. A little girl nearby dropped frosting on her dress and began to cry. Her mother rushed over, laughing softly, wiping it away with a napkin. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's just cake. Just cake." I almost smiled at that. Because yes, it was just cake. Just a chair. Just a name card. Just a moment. That's how these things always look from the outside. Small, harmless, explainable. But when you stack enough of those just moments together, they become something else entirely. I leaned back slightly in my chair, and that's when I heard it. My daughter-in-law's voice. Not loud, not meant for everyone, but close enough. "She's still here," she said. A soft laugh followed. Another voice, one of her friends, I think, responded, "I thought she left." "No," my daughter-in-law replied. "She doesn't take hints very well." They both laughed. Light, easy, like they were commenting on the weather. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to, because in that moment, something became clear in a way it never had before. This wasn't passive. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was intention, carefully packaged in politeness, disguised as oversight, but intentional all the same. I rested my hands on my knees, felt the fabric of my blouse beneath my fingers, grounding myself, because I could feel something rising in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Something sharper. Recognition. A boy, one of Ethan's friends, ran up to the gift table and started picking through the presents. "Can we open them now?" he shouted. "Not yet," my daughter-in-law called back, laughing. "We'll do that later." Later. There was always a later. A later I was never really part of. I glanced at the gift I had brought. Still sitting there. Unopened. Unnoticed. No tag with my name. No way for anyone to know where it came from. Or maybe, no one cared enough to ask. I thought about walking over, saying something, making sure my grandson knew which one was mine. But I didn't move. Because suddenly, that felt like asking for credit. And I wasn't there for that. At least, not anymore. Across the yard, my son finally looked at me again. This time, he didn't look away immediately. He hesitated. Just for a second. Like he might come over. Like he might say something. Anything. But then my daughter-in-law touched his arm, leaned in, said something I couldn't hear. And just like that, he turned back to the table. Decision made. Without a word. I exhaled slowly. Not disappointed. Not surprised. Just aware. More aware than I had been in a long time. The music changed. Something louder. More upbeat. People started gathering their things. Some said their goodbyes. Others lingered. But no one came to me. No one said, "Thank you for coming." No one said, "Drive safe." No one even said my name. I stood up quietly, smoothed out my blouse, took one last look at the yard, at the decorations, at the people who were supposed to be my family. And then I turned toward the driveway. No announcement. No scene. Just leaving. As I reached my car, I paused, hand on the door, and for a moment, I let myself feel it. Not the humiliation. Not the sadness. But the truth. Clear. Undeniable. They hadn't just forgotten me today. They had been erasing me, piece by piece, for years. I got into the car and closed the door gently. Sat there for a second, hands resting on the steering wheel, the noise of the party fading behind me. And in that quiet, a thought settled in. Calm, steady, final. If they could plan a party without me, then maybe it was time I started planning my life. Without them, I didn't start the car right away. I just sat there, hands on the wheel, engine off. The sound of the party still drifting faintly through the closed windows. Laughter, music, a child shouting something I couldn't quite make out. For a moment, I let myself pretend that if I walked back in, someone might notice. That someone might say, "Wait, where are you going?" That my grandson might run toward me, cake on his fingers, calling Grandma. But I didn't move, because deep down, I already knew better. Instead, I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. And that's when the memories started coming. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like they had been waiting. The first one was small. Ethan's 3rd birthday. I remembered asking what time the party started. "Oh, we're keeping it really simple this year," my daughter-in-law had said over the phone. "Just something small at home." So I baked a cake. Chocolate. His favorite. I showed up an hour early, just to help. But when I got there, cars lined the street, music playing, a full party already in progress. "Oh," she had said, opening the door just enough to block the view behind her. We ended up inviting a few more people last minute. It got a little crowded. Crowded. There hadn't been space for me to help, or to sit, or to be included in anything meaningful. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding that cake, while someone else carried out a bigger one. Store-bought. Perfect. Unnecessary. I had smiled. Of course I had. Said, "That's okay," like it didn't matter. Like I didn't notice. The second memory came sharper. Christmas. 2 years ago. I had asked what time dinner would be. "We're doing something low-key this year," my son had said. Just. Immediate family. Immediate. I didn't question it. I stayed home. Made myself a small plate. Watched an old movie. Told myself it was fine. The next morning, photos appeared online. A full table. Neighbors. Friends. Extended family. Everyone. Everyone except me. The caption read, "So grateful for nights like this." I stared at that picture longer than I should have, trying to understand where I fit in it, or why I didn't. Another memory followed. School play. Ethan had a small role. Just one line. But I wanted to be there. I asked for the time. "Oh, it's during the day," my daughter-in-law said. "You probably wouldn't want to drive in traffic." I nodded. Trusted her. Later, I found out it was at 6 p.m. Early evening. Easy. Manageable. I missed it. And no one told me. Each memory small. Explainable. Easy to dismiss on its own. But sitting there in that car, they began to connect. Like pieces of something I had refused to see. A pattern. Not loud. Not obvious. But consistent. Careful. Intentional. I opened my eyes slowly. The windshield framed the house in front of me. Bright balloons. Open gate. People moving in and out. A perfect picture. And I realized something that settled deep in my chest. This didn't start today. Today was just the first time. They stopped hiding it. I glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Soft lines. Silver hair. Eyes that had seen more than they used to admit. For years, I had told myself stories. They're busy. They didn't mean it. It's just a misunderstanding. I had protected them. Excused them. Minimized everything, so I wouldn't have to face what it really meant. Because the truth was harder. The truth was, they had been making space in their lives. Just not for me. I let out a slow breath. Steady. Controlled. And something inside me shifted again. Not painfully this time. Not like before. This felt different. Clearer. Like fog lifting. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't wondering if I had done something wrong. I wasn't asking what I could fix. Because there was nothing to fix. This wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. And if they could make that decision, then so could I. I reached forward and started the engine. The sound was quiet. Ordinary. But it felt final. I didn't look back at the house again. Didn't wait for anyone to come out. Didn't hope for a last-minute call of my name. Because hope was the one thing I was finally ready to put down. As I pulled out of the driveway, the music faded completely, replaced by silence. And in that silence, a new thought formed. Not emotional. Not reactive. Just certain. They had been deciding my place in their lives. Without me. Now, it was time I decided theirs. I didn't drive straight home. Not at first. Instead, I turned left at the end of the street and kept going. No destination. No plan. Just movement. Because sitting still, after everything I had just seen, just understood, felt heavier than I was ready for. The late afternoon sun stretched long across the road. Houses blurred past. Trees. Stop signs. Familiar places I had driven by for years without really seeing them. Today, I noticed everything. Or maybe, I noticed nothing. My mind was elsewhere. Not replaying the party. Not replaying the laughter. But replaying something quieter. Something older. The years I had spent making myself convenient. I thought about the times my son called and asked for help. "Mom, could you watch Ethan for a few hours?" Of course I could. I always could. I rearranged doctor's appointments. Canceled plans. Drove across town in traffic just to sit in their living room while my grandson napped. No complaints. No hesitation. Because that's what mothers do. That's what grandmothers do. I thought about the money. Small amounts at first. "Mom, we're a little tight this month." "Mom, daycare is more expensive than we thought." "Mom, we'll pay you back." I never kept track. Didn't want to. Because keeping track makes things feel like transactions. And I never wanted that. I wanted family. I wanted love. I wanted to believe that what I gave was simply part of something bigger. Something mutual. Something real. I pulled into a small parking lot without realizing it. A grocery store. One I had been going to for over 20 years. I parked. Turned off the engine. Sat there again. But this time, it felt different. Not heavy. Not confused. Just aware. I watched people coming and going. Shopping carts. Bags. Ordinary life continuing like nothing had shifted. And for them, nothing had. But for me, something had. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Scrolled for a moment. Then stopped. There it was. A message thread. My son. The last message was from me. Do you need anything for the party tomorrow? No reply. Before that, should I come early to help set up? No reply. Before that, what time should I be there? A short answer. 2 p.m. Nothing else. No warmth. No detail. No, we'd love to see you. Just information. Necessary. Minimal. Enough to keep things moving. Not enough to include me. I stared at the screen for a few seconds longer than I should have. Then I locked the phone. Slipped it back into my purse. And that's when it happened. Not a big realization. Not something dramatic. Just a quiet shift in how I saw everything. For years, I had been trying to understand their behavior. Trying to interpret it. Explain it. Excuse it. But sitting there, in that parking lot, I realized something simple. I had been asking the wrong question. Not, why are they treating me this way? But, why have I allowed it? The answer came just as quietly. Because I love them. Because I believed that if I kept showing up, they would eventually meet me there. Because I thought patience would be rewarded. Because I thought sacrifice would be remembered. I let out a small breath. Almost a laugh. Not bitter. Just honest. It doesn't work that way. Not always. Not with people who have already decided your place. I looked down at my hands again. Still steady. That surprised me. Because a younger version of me would have been crying by now. Would have been calling someone. Would have been trying to fix it. Explain it. Salvage something. But not today. Today, I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was finally starting to see it clearly. And clarity is a quiet kind of power. I opened the car door and stepped out. Walked into the store. Not because I needed anything, but because I needed to move. To exist somewhere that didn't already have a place defined for me. The air conditioning hit my skin. Cool. Neutral. No. Expectations. I picked up a basket. Walked slowly through the aisles. Past things I didn't need. Things I used to buy for them. Snacks Ethan liked. Drinks my son preferred. Items I automatically reached for without thinking. Today, I didn't pick any of them up. I kept walking. Stopped once in front of a small display. Bicycles. Children's bikes. Bright colors. Training wheels. Almost identical to the one sitting back at that party. Unopened. Unclaimed. I stood there for a moment. Then I smiled. Not sadly. Not nostalgically. Just knowingly. Because for the first time, I wasn't thinking about whether he would remember who gave it to him. Or whether they would mention my name. Or whether I had done enough. I was thinking something else. Something new. Something steady. If they could overlook me so easily, then maybe I didn't need to keep proving my place anymore. I set the basket down. Empty. And walked out of the store. Back into the warm air. Back to my car. And as I sat down again, one thought settled in. Clearer than anything before it. I had spent years trying to stay included in their lives. Maybe it was time to see what my life looked like. Without needing their approval at all. I drove home just before sunset. The sky had that soft, fading light, gold turning into gray. The kind of evening that usually feels peaceful. But that day, it felt quiet in a different way. Not comforting, just still. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat there for a second, looking at the house. The same house I had lived in for over 30 years. The same porch. The same windows. The same front door my son used to run through when he was little, backpack bouncing, shouting, "Mom, I'm home." Now, it was just a house, and I was just arriving. I stepped out of the car slowly. No rush. No one waiting. Inside, the air felt familiar. Clean. Unchanged. Exactly the way I had left it that morning. I set my purse down on the kitchen counter. Took off my shoes. And for a moment, I just stood there, listening. Nothing. No voices. No footsteps. No background noise from a television someone forgot to turn off. Just silence. I walked over to the sink and turned on the faucet. Watched the water run. Then turned it off again. No reason. Just something to break the stillness. On the table sat a small stack of envelopes. Bills. Advertisements. Things that didn't matter. I flipped through them without really seeing. Then I noticed something else. A photograph. It had been sitting there for a while, I think. I just hadn't looked at it closely. It was from a few years ago, Ethan's first birthday. We were all in it. My son standing behind me, one hand on my shoulder. My daughter-in-law beside him, smiling for the camera. And me, holding Ethan. He was looking up at me, laughing. His tiny hand wrapped around my finger. I picked up the photo, studied it. The smiles looked real. At least, I think they were. It's hard to tell, looking back, because now I know what came after, and it changes how everything before feels. I set the photo back down gently, not with sadness, just acknowledgement. Then I walked to the living room and sat in my usual chair, the one by the window, the one where I used to wait for visits that became less and less frequent over time. At first, they came every weekend, then every other, then just holidays. Then, when it was convenient, I used to track those changes, notice them, wonder about them. Now, I just saw them for what they were. Distance, gradual, intentional. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes for a moment, and instead of thinking about today, I thought about tomorrow. Not what they would do, not whether they would call, not what excuse might come, but what I would do. That felt new. For a long time, my days had been shaped around them. Their schedules, their needs, their invitations, or lack of them. I waited, adjusted, made space. But sitting there, in that quiet room, I realized something I hadn't let myself consider before. I had time, my own time, unclaimed, unscheduled, uncontrolled by anyone else. And I didn't know what to do with it. That should have felt scary, but it didn't. It felt open. I opened my eyes and looked around the room. At the furniture I had chosen, the books I had read, the life I had built long before everything started revolving around them. It was still here. I was still here. I stood up, slowly, walked to the hallway, past the guest room, and used for months, past the closet where I kept extra blankets for visits that stopped happening. Then I reached my bedroom. On the dresser sat a small wooden box. I hadn't opened it in a while. Not because I couldn't, just because I hadn't needed to. Until now. I lifted the lid. Inside were documents. Old papers. Things I had organized years ago and then forgotten about. Not entirely forgotten. Just set aside. I flipped through them slowly. Insurance. Property papers. Savings accounts. Things that represented security. Independence. Choices. I paused, fingers resting on the edge of one folder. And a thought came, not emotional, not reactive, just practical. For years, I had been thinking about what I could give them, what I should leave behind, what would help, what would make things easier. But today, for the first time, I asked a different question. What did I want? Not what they expected, not what they assumed, not what they had already started planning around, but what I actually wanted. I closed the box gently, not making any decisions yet, not rushing, just considering, because whatever came next wouldn't be about reacting to them. It would be about choosing for myself. I walked back into the living room. The light outside had dimmed, shadows stretching across the floor. The house felt different now, not empty, not lonely, just mine. I sat down again, hands resting calmly in my lap. And in that quiet, one thing became very clear. They had already made their plans. They had shown me exactly where I stood. Now, it was my turn to decide what I was going to do about it. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had somewhere to be, not because I had anything scheduled, but because my mind was already awake, clear, quiet, and focused in a way it hadn't been in years. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, waiting to feel something heavy, something left over from yesterday. But it didn't come. No anger, no sadness, just clarity. I got out of bed slowly, made my way to the kitchen, turned on the coffee maker. The same routine I had followed for decades. But this time it felt different, not automatic, intentional. I poured myself a cup and sat at the table. No phone, no distractions, just me, and the silence. For years, I had filled this silence with thoughts about them, what they needed, what they might say, what I should do next. Today, I didn't. I took a sip of coffee, and instead, I thought about something simple. Control, not over them. That was never real, but over myself, over what I gave, over what I allowed, over what I accepted. I set the cup down gently. Then I stood up and walked back to the bedroom, opened that same wooden box again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I took out the folder I had paused on the night before, sat down at the desk, and opened it. Inside were documents I hadn't reviewed in years. My will, my accounts, Everything neatly organized. Everything already decided. Or at least it had been. I read through it slowly, line by line. Names, percentages, assumptions, all written during a time when I believed something very different about my place in their lives. Back then, it made sense. Back then, I thought I was planning for family. Now, it felt like I was reading instructions for someone else's expectations, not mine. I closed the folder for a moment, sat still, let the realization settle. Because this wasn't about anger. This wasn't about punishment. This was about alignment. About making my choices match the reality I had finally accepted. I opened the folder again, reached for a pen, and for the first time, I didn't feel hesitation. I didn't think about how they would react. I didn't imagine their voices, their opinions, their disappointment, because none of that had been present yesterday. None of that had stopped them from making their choices. So why should it stop me from making mine? I made a small change, then another. Nothing dramatic, nothing reckless, just deliberate. Each adjustment felt quiet, precise, like moving pieces into their proper place. When I finished, I didn't rush. I reviewed everything again, carefully, making sure it reflected something true. Not what I used to believe, but what I now understood. I closed the folder, placed it back in the box, and this time, I didn't feel like I was putting something away. I felt like I had just taken something back. I stood up, walked to the window. The morning light was stronger now, clear, uncomplicated. I watched a neighbor walk their dog. He waved when he saw me. I waved back. A small interaction. Simple, but real. No tension, no guessing, no silent rules, just acknowledgement. I realized then how long it had been since something felt that straightforward. I went back to the kitchen, finished my coffee, then picked up my phone, not to check messages, not to see if they had called, because I already knew they hadn't. And more importantly, I didn't need them to. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts, paused on a name I hadn't called in a while. An old friend, someone I had slowly drifted away from, not because of conflict, but because I had been too busy showing up for people who stopped showing up for me. I pressed the call button, let it ring. When she answered, her voice was surprised, warm. "Hey, it's been a while." I smiled. "It has," I said, and for the first time in a long time. That didn't feel like a loss. It felt like an opening. We talked. Nothing dramatic, nothing heavy, just conversation. But it grounded me in something I hadn't realized I was missing. Connection. That didn't require me to shrink. When the call ended, I set the phone down, looked around the kitchen again. Same space, same walls, same life. But it felt different, because I was different. Yesterday, they showed me where I stood. Today, I started choosing where I would stand instead. And that was the beginning of something they had never planned for. Because for the first time, I wasn't waiting to be included. I was deciding who deserved a place in my life at all. The call stayed with me longer than I expected. Not the words themselves, just the feeling. After I hung up, I didn't rush into anything else. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my phone again. I just stood there in the kitchen, letting that simple conversation settle. It had been easy, effortless. No guessing, no careful wording, no wondering if I had said too much or not enough. Just normal. I realized then how long it had been since anything with my own family felt like that. I moved through the rest of the morning slowly, washed my cup, straightened the counter, opened the windows to let in some fresh air. Small things, ordinary things, but each one felt intentional, like I was reclaiming space, not just in the house, but in my own life. Around noon, my phone buzzed. I didn't rush to it. I finished what I was doing first. Then I walked over and picked it up. A message from my son. "Hey, sorry we didn't get a chance to talk yesterday. Things were hectic. Thanks for coming." I read it once. Then again. The words were polite, neutral, almost professional, like something you'd send to a coworker after a meeting. Not your mother. No mention of the chair. No mention of what his wife said. No mention of the way I had been left standing, watching from the side. Just hectic. I stared at the screen for a moment, waiting to feel something. Hurt, anger, disappointment. But none of it came the way it used to. Because now, I understood. This wasn't an apology. It was a placeholder. Something to smooth things over, without actually addressing anything. Something to keep the surface calm, while the truth stayed underneath. I typed a response, then stopped, deleted it, typed again, paused, and then I put the phone down. Not out of spite, not to play games, but because for the first time, I didn't feel the need to respond immediately, or at all. Silence wasn't avoidance anymore. It was a choice. I went back to the living room, sat down, picked up a book I hadn't touched in months, tried to read, but my mind drifted again. Not to the party, not to the message, but to something else. Something I had heard yesterday. She doesn't take hints very well. I repeated the sentence in my head, slowly, carefully, because now I wasn't hearing it as an insult. I was hearing it as information. They had been giving hints. Subtle, gradual, easy to ignore, and I had ignored them because I didn't want to believe what they meant. But now, I did. And once you understand the message, you don't need them to repeat it. I set the book down, looked around the room again. Everything felt quieter today. Not empty, just settled, like something had shifted into place. I stood up and walked back to the hallway, past the guest room again. This time I stopped, opened the door. The room was exactly as I had left it. Clean, ready, prepared for visits that never came. I stepped inside, looked at the bed, the neatly folded blankets, the extra pillows, all arranged for comfort, for someone else. I walked over slowly, smoothed the edge of the blanket with my hand. Then I did something small, something simple. I pulled the pillows off the bed, folded the blankets differently, not as a guest space, but as something else, something mine, a reading room, a quiet space, a place I could use instead of waiting for someone else to need it. The change was small, but it felt significant because it wasn't about the room. It was about the intention behind it. I wasn't preparing anymore. I wasn't holding space for people who had already decided not to fill it. I was using it, reclaiming it. I stepped back, looked at the room again, and for the first time, it didn't feel like something incomplete. It felt finished. I closed the door gently, walked back down the hall, and as I passed the mirror, I caught my reflection. I paused, looked at myself, really looked, not searching for what had changed, but recognizing what had. There was no visible difference. Same face, same lines, same silver hair, but behind it, something had shifted, not outwardly, but deeply. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't hoping they would notice, or fix things, or suddenly understand, because understanding was no longer necessary. They had shown me everything I needed to see, and now I was starting to respond, not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly, and for the first time, that felt enough. That afternoon, I finally replied, not right away, not out of habit, and not because I felt I had to. I waited, not to make a point, just to make sure whatever I said came from clarity, not reaction. I picked up my phone again, read his message one more time. Things were hectic. I noticed how easy that word was, how it erased everything without actually saying anything. I typed slowly, then stopped, adjusted a few words, read it again, then sent it. I'm glad the party went well. That was it. No questions, no emotion, no mention of what had happened, because I wasn't looking for an explanation anymore. I set the phone down and didn't pick it back up, not to check if he read it, not to see if he was typing, because I already knew how this worked. He would respond, eventually, briefly, carefully, enough to keep things neutral, and that was fine, because neutral was all that was left. I stood up and walked into the kitchen again, opened the fridge, looked inside. Simple things, leftovers, groceries I had bought out of habit, meals I used to plan around visits that no longer happened. I reached for a container, paused, then closed the fridge. Not hungry, not distracted, just aware of how many of my routines had been built around people who weren't showing up anymore. I turned instead toward the window, watched the street, cars passing, neighbors walking, life continuing, unbothered, unchanged, and for the first time, I didn't feel left behind by it. I felt separate from it, in a way that wasn't lonely, just independent. My phone buzzed again. I didn't move right away, but after a moment, I walked over and picked it up. A reply from my son. Yeah, it was great. Ethan had fun. Appreciate you coming. I read it once, then locked the screen, set the phone down. And that was the moment everything became completely clear. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. There was no gap anymore. No confusion. No maybe. Just confirmation. He was comfortable with how things were. Comfortable with me being on the edge. Comfortable with not addressing it. Comfortable with keeping things exactly as they were. And for years, I had adjusted myself to fit into that comfort. Made myself smaller, quieter, easier to overlook. But now, I saw it for what it was. Not something I had to accept. Just something I had been accepting. I walked back to the living room. Sat down. Let the silence settle again. But this silence was different from the day before. Yesterday, it had felt like something was missing. Today, it felt like something unnecessary had been removed. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes for a moment, and instead of replaying what happened, I thought about what I had done. Not the big things, not the sacrifices, just the pattern. The way I had always shown up first, given first, adjusted first, and waited for it to come back. But it hadn't, not in the way I believed it would. And that wasn't because I had done something wrong. It was because they had never been planning to meet me halfway. That realization didn't hurt anymore. It settled, like a truth that had finally found its place. I opened my eyes, looked around the room again. Everything was still. Everything was mine. And for the first time, that felt like enough. I stood up, walked to the small table near the window, picked up the photograph again. The one from years ago, Ethan's first birthday. All of us together, smiling, close, connected. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I placed it back down. Not face down, not hidden, just where it belonged. In the past. Because that version of us didn't exist anymore. And holding on to it was the only thing keeping me from seeing what was real now. I turned away from the table, walked slowly toward the hallway, not thinking about them, not wondering what they would do next, just moving forward. And as I did, one final thought settled in. Simple, clear, unshakable. They hadn't pushed me out all at once. They had done it slowly, quietly, so I wouldn't notice. But now that I had, I didn't need to fight for a place that was never meant for me. I just needed to stop standing where I wasn't wanted and choose somewhere else. Somewhere I actually belonged. The next few days were quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels empty. The kind that feels deliberate. I didn't reach out. I didn't check my phone every hour. I didn't replay conversations or imagine what I should have said differently. Because there was nothing left to correct. Nothing left to fix. Instead, I moved through my days slowly. Intentionally. I woke up when I wanted. Ate when I was hungry. Sat where I felt comfortable. Simple things. But each one reminded me. I wasn't adjusting anymore. I was choosing. On the third day, I went back to that wooden box. Not out of emotion. Not out of impulse. Just because I knew there was one more step I needed to take. I carried it to the desk. Opened it. Took out the folder again. This time, I didn't read through everything. I already knew what was inside. What mattered now was what I was going to do with it. I picked up the phone. Dialed a number I hadn't used in a while. A familiar voice answered. Calm. Professional. Good morning, this is Daniel. Hi, Daniel, I said. This is Margaret Hayes. A small pause. Then recognition. Mrs. Hayes. Of course. How are you? I'm well, I replied. And I was. That was the first time I noticed it. Not pretending. Not convincing myself. Just stating it. I'd like to schedule a time to review my documents, I continued. I think it's time for some updates. Of course, he said. We can go over everything. When would you like to come in? Soon, I answered. This week, if possible. We set a time. Short. First time in a long time. That felt comfortable. Not isolating. Just peaceful. I took a slow sip. Let the warmth settle. And I realized something I hadn't fully allowed myself to admit before. I had been waiting for them to decide my place. Waiting for invitations. Waiting for acknowledgement. Waiting for things to feel the way they used to. But life doesn't pause while you wait. It moves. It changes. And if you don't move with it, you get left standing in a place that no longer exists. I wasn't there anymore. I had stepped out of it. Quietly. Without confrontation. Without explanation. But completely. As I sat there, I thought about the party again. Not the pain of it. Not the humiliation. But the moment itself. The chair. Or rather, the absence of it. It had seemed small. Almost insignificant. But now I understood. It had been exact. Intentional. A clear message. There was no place set for me. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to find one. I wasn't trying to pull up a chair. Or wait for someone to notice. I was simply choosing not to sit at that table anymore. I finished my tea, set the cup down, and looked out the window one last time. The world moved. People came and went. Life continued. And so would I. Just not in the same way. Not in the same place. No. He looked up briefly. Waiting. Not pushing. Just giving me space to speak. And I did. Not with a long explanation. Not with emotion. Just facts. I'd like to make some changes. He nodded once. Of course. We went through each section slowly. Names. Allocations. Decisions that had once felt obvious. Now they didn't. I adjusted things. Not drastically. Not recklessly. Haven't heard from you. Thought maybe we could get together this weekend. Let me know. I listened to the message once. Then I deleted it. Not out of anger. Not to make a statement. Just because I didn't need to keep it. I set the phone down again. Looked around the room. The same room. The same quiet. But now, there was nothing unresolved sitting inside it. No waiting. No wondering. No unfinished thoughts. I walked to the window. Looked outside. The street was calm. Unchanged. And for the first time, so was I? Because everything that needed to shift already had. They hadn't planned for me. That much was clear. But what they hadn't expected was that I would stop planning around them entirely. And now, there was nothing left for them to adjust to. Only something for them to notice. If they ever chose to. I didn't call him back that day. Or the next. Not because I was trying to prove something. Not because I wanted him to feel what I had felt. But because, for the first time, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. Saturday came quietly. The day he had mentioned in his message. The day we were supposed to get together. I woke up early again. Not out of habit. Just naturally. The house was still. Soft morning light coming through the window. I made my coffee. Sat at the table. And for a moment, I thought about what that day would have looked like before. I would have waited for his call. Kept the day open. Prepared something simple for lunch. Just in case. Always just in case. But today, there was no waiting. No just in case. I had already made plans. My own. At 10 o'clock, I left the house. Drove across town. Not to see them, but to meet someone else. My friend. The one I had called earlier in the week. She was already there when I arrived. Sitting outside, a cup of coffee in front of her. She waved when she saw me. A real wave. Not polite. Not distracted. Just happy to see me. I walked over. Sat down. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to fit into a space. I already belonged there. We talked. About small things. About life. About nothing important. And somehow, that made it important. No one checked the time. No one rushed. No one made me feel like I was an extra piece that didn't quite fit. Hours passed, and I didn't notice. Not until my phone buzzed. I glanced at it. A message. From my son. Hey, we waited for you. Are you still coming? I read it once. Then I looked up. At the table. At my friend. At the moment I was in. And I understood something so clearly, it didn't even feel like a decision. I typed back. I didn't plan to come today. I paused. Then added one more line. I hope you have a good weekend. I sent it. Set the phone down. And that was it. No explanation. No argument. No attempt to make him understand. Because understanding was no longer something I needed from him. We went back to talking. Back to something simple. Something real. And for the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was noticing what I had found. Later that afternoon, I returned home. The house welcomed me the same way it always had. Quiet. Still. But no longer empty. I walked into the living room. Sat in my chair by the window. Looked outside. The same street. The same passing cars. The same world. But I wasn't looking at it the same way anymore. I reached for the photograph again. The one from years ago. Ethan's first birthday. All of us together. Smiling. Close. Connected. I held it for a moment. Then I stood up. Walked to the shelf. And placed it there. Not hidden. Not removed. Just repositioned. Where it belonged. As a memory. Not a measure of what things should still be. I stepped back. Looked at it one last time. And then I turned away. Because I didn't need to hold on to that version of us anymore. I had already stepped into something new. Something quieter. But stronger. I walked to the window again. Rested my hand lightly on the frame. And let the moment settle. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just complete. They hadn't planned for me. Not at that table. Not in that moment. Not in the life they were building. But what they didn't understand, what they never planned for, was this. That I would stop waiting. That I would stop asking. That I would stop standing in spaces where I wasn't seen. And instead, I would build my own. Quietly. Deliberately. Without needing their permission. I didn't need a chair at their table anymore. Because I had finally learned something far more important. I could walk away. And still be whole. And in that realization, there was no anger. No regret. Just peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from being included, but from knowing exactly where you belong and choosing it for yourself.